Kick, Dembélé la deixa cap a la frontal, la té Pedri, se la prepara, xutarà, torna a retallar, encara no, xuta! Gol! Gol, 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 gol!
This video is sponsored by ClipDraw, a software that we use to edit our videos. If you're interested in using this software too, please see the description below for affiliate links. A blend between Xavi and Iniesta, or a regen imitation that will ultimately flatter to deceive. Just how good is Pedri Gonzalez?
Tres empats. Minut 18 de la segona meitat, 0-0, però el Barça sembla que apreta una mica.
Statistically, Pedri looks like he barely creates any chances of note, yet to the naked eye, he looks like he could thread a pass through the eye of the needle and clearly lay chances on a plate. So how do we explain this paradox? One explanation is that, like Iniesta, Pedri is someone who makes a lot of clever passes, smart passes between the lines which help unlock the defensive structure of the opposition, but not the final pass before the goal. In this situation here, he's clearly got the vision. He can spot that there's three midfielders trying to press him, but the space is out there, and he can spot the run of Dembele. He's got his head up, left foot pass, plays Dembele in. So clearly someone who might not be at the end of an assist, but a very important player in terms of how he progresses the game. He's someone who, because he's responsible for the flow of the team, so involved in the build-up and general midfield dictation, his game isn't really geared towards just being a specialist chance creator like a Bruno Fernandes. Now, the way Barcelona plays, that their wide players, Dembele, as we saw in that clip, and Rafinha, they've got the shackles off. They're the ones who are constantly chance creating merchants, whereas the midfield are there to control proceedings and be more subtle in terms of how they create. And they also ensure Barcelona are in constant possession and control of the game. Statistically, Pedri does not dribble as much as a Musiala, whose ball carrying seems an integral feature of his game to the extent where he can also be deployed as a winger. He's also a more powerful runner with the ball, someone who can power past his fullback. But what Pedri brings in contrast is an ethereal level of precision. He's reminiscent of his predecessor Iniesta in the way that he uses croquettes, feints, deceptive changes of pace. And despite his slight frame, he has the balance to ride challenges. I wouldn't say his balance is as good as Iniesta, but that's a really high level to try and match. But he has more flair than Iniesta, more tricks and skills. So he's more of a mixture of an Isco and Iniesta in terms of his overall skill set. And therefore, that gives him a greater range of dribbling weapons for when he enters into the box or finds himself surrounded. Now, it's worth remembering, he's still only 19, he's very slim. So as he grows into his body, he adds muscle, his dribbling will automatically become more effective as he naturally gains strength and power, and that will allow him to burst away from defenders with more effectiveness. He's particularly effective dribbling in the half space or in central regions, so you wouldn't really want him out on the wing, so the Musiala position is perfect for him. Pedri might not be hitting De Bruyne numbers just yet in terms of goals, but he's only 19, and even if he doesn't become a huge goal threat in the future, i.e. a 20-goal a season midfielder, it's fair to say he will become a more consistent goal threat than Iniesta ever was. He's someone who has that natural drift towards the box, he makes continued runs after playing the 1-2, and he generally has the presence of mind to find a finish when he's being flooded with pressure. He's someone who can also strike from range. He has particularly a wonderful curl technique with his instep. Feels like he can place it from a range of 20 to 25 yards, especially first-time shots. He's very effective at that. He hasn't quite got a proficient left foot just yet, but as we saw in the Bayern game just recently, you always feel like he's willing to use it when the opportunity presents itself, and I anticipate it getting better and better and becoming a goal source in its own right. He also has a taste for being a goal threat on the bigger stage. Just like we mentioned in that Bayern game, I personally thought he was Barca's biggest goal threat in a big pressure game. The only issue with Pedri is that to be a true goal-scoring midfielder, it can sometimes take away from you being... Considering Pedri is an attacking midfielder, 55 passes per game average is a high volume of passes. It's more than most central midfielders. So Pedri is a player who has a big impact on the tempo of a game and plays a role in directing proceedings despite featuring further up the pitch. What's also interesting is that his accuracy rate of 88%. Players like De Bruyne, Bruno Fernandes, They have a lower percentage due to the amount of risks they take with the ball, but with Pedri, it doesn't feel like he's a risk-averse player. It's just he's able to progress the game in a very efficient manner. It's a very typical Barcelona trait. It's something we associated with Xavi, Iniesta, who says you can't get reward without necessarily having to be reckless. As he ages, I could see him dropping into the regista role, something I didn't quite envisage with Iniesta. Iniesta almost looked odd when he was featuring anywhere that wasn't down that left half space. His whole gait really suited slaloming down that left side of the pitch. Pedri has an innately better feel for controlling the overall narrative of the game like a proper number 10. It isn't on par with Xavi, but in 10 years' time it will be interesting to see how far this aspect of his game grows.
Who's got Dembele nearby. He misses him out to find Pedri into the area. Oh, what a chance.
Now on to another one of Pedri's special traits. His long passing, his switches of play are mesmeric. Only Modric has a better percentage, and it seems strange to describe a Barcelona midfielder as a wonderful long passer, but Pedri's not from the tiki-taka era. He's part of the new breed. It's almost as if his first instinct is to try and switch the play rather than it being an afterthought. He's not overly obsessed with just playing neat little triangles. What's scary is the switcher play seems to be on tap. It never feels like a risk or hurried, and it's perfectly placed for his teammates to take it in their stride. Now, whilst Pedri can create chances from the long pass, I wouldn't say his long passing in behind is as creative as, say, a Pirlo or a Maradona, but playing for Barcelona, that might be a touch too much to ask for, as they see that as an overly risky way of trying to create chances. In terms of technique, keeps his head over the ball well, laces it with a good loft and steady pace. I wouldn't say it zips along like a Scholes or Alonso, but it doesn't feel like it slows down the momentum. Pedri's aerial stats are surprisingly good compared to fellow techno-midget style midfielders. He's not a strong goal threat in the air, but he does try and compete. The eye test suggests it's not really a strong part of his game and that he is prone to being dominated in the air, but he's plucky. He's someone who wins more than what his size in theory should permit, especially for a creative midfielder. He has at times successfully won balls from goal kicks or even second ball situations where the odds seemed against him. Despite always willing to jump though, he does at times look like he's defeated before the jump has even started. So he's not necessarily going to be willing to put his body on the line each time he goes for a header. Now, despite his low goal scoring numbers with his head, he does have good anticipation as to where the cross will land, and his runs are hard to pick up. Despite that, the timing of his headers and the accuracy leaves a lot to be desired. I do expect him to score 1 or 2 headers over the course of his career, just don't expect him to turn into Tim Cahill. With Xavi well versed in high pressing football, it's no surprise to see Pedri completing a high number of defensive actions. Having said that, whilst his success rate statistically looks decent, based on the eye test, he misses an awful lot of slide tackles. And if he is ever going to become a central midfielder towards the end of his career, it's an aspect of his game he will need to tighten up. Paul Scholes had a similar issue where he would mistime his tackles, only difference being he would end up just going through the man. Pedri tends to avoid the collision altogether. But what Scholes did eventually learn, especially once Queiroz came to the table, was that as long as he had the ability to hold his position and plug the gap, he could help leave that midfield line unexposed. With Pedri, it's not a big issue at the moment because he's mostly playing cam, but when he does eventually become a regista, it's something he needs to be mindful of. Pedri features as the mezzala for Barcelona in their 4-3-3 system. It's exactly where Iniesta featured under Pep. He generally occupies that left half space, looking to create and control from that region. Where he differs from Iniesta is that ability to switch play and not just accumulate lots of passes in that left half space, focusing on utter domination, suffocation via possession. Instead, Pedri, whilst he does seek to control, pushes the game forward whenever he sees the opportunity, and he's not hesitating to switch it when it's open. Similarly, in terms of goal threat, Pedri is again different, more progressive. He's someone whose game seems to revolve around wanting to get into goal scoring positions. He's not leaving it to a Messi, Neymar or Suarez. He's actually wanting to be a match winner himself, has more of that match winner mentality than Iniesta, for whom it was out of character to win big games. So that's what made his interventions in the World Cup final and the Champions League semis seem so remarkable. In conclusion, Pedri, already at the age of 18, 19, he's proven he can influence international championships. He started for a pretty weak, up-and-coming Spain side and carrying it to the semi-final, a feat that would have been beyond Xavi and Iniesta at that respective age. He's the heartbeat of the Barca midfield, in my opinion, and that was especially apparent in their recent game against Bayern, where against stiffer opposition, he's probably the only one who looked a cut above and very comfortable in a pressure game against quality. What could be his potential drawbacks? Well, the question is, he's peaking quite early at the moment, and his early peak is superior than his predecessors. But does he have the higher ceiling? Does he have the room to grow, and to what degree? Iniesta and Xavi ended up as GOATs of football and redefined the game as we know it. That is such a high standard to meet. Iniesta athletically had more spring in his step. He had greater sprint endurance, pitch coverage. It was underrated. He was also a more precise passer. Look at his underrated cameo for Barca during the 2006 Champions League final. He barely put a foot wrong. His dribbling in that final was untouchable, and that was way before his prime. Xavi had superior passing range and endless stamina, pinpoint perfect precision passing and movement off the ball. Now, this is a bold claim, but I think Xavi and Iniesta were also quite fortunate to come through in an era of unparalleled talent for Barca and for Spain, and they flourished under Pep Guardiola, a GOAT-level manager. So they were in a perfect storm, and that's what helped overall to push them into GOAT status. The question for Pedri is, he's coming through an uncertain era for Barcelona and Spain, where the future's at risk and the national pool isn't as strong. So these factors may have an impact as to his development and what overall reputation he gains by the end of his career. His potential is GOAT status, I think. He has something special, intangibly special. And I do feel like he has physical growth to come in his game, and his control will get better and better. Whether he becomes arguably the best Spanish midfielder of all time ahead of Luis Suarez, Miramontes, Iniesta, Xavi, it remains to be seen. Anyway guys, hope you enjoyed the video. Please like, share and subscribe, and see you guys again next time. Bye.